What's up, guys? Let's take a look at another CodeWars exercise. This one's called Human Readable Duration Format. Pretty scary title, and it's a level 4, so it should be a hard one. But the reason I chose this is that if you take every little thing involved in the problem, every little bit of computation and logic we need to do, we've already done it before. I'm going to show you how this connects. I'm going to show you how this connects to a project we did back in semester 1, I think, and it's really the same thing in a new skin, in a new disguise. So this says we're going to get a number of seconds. It might be a lot. It might be thousands or millions of seconds, and our job is to express it in how many years, how many days, how many hours, something nicer, and something more like what we would say in real life. Now, if you notice, and maybe it'll take a second, but I'll show you how it works, this is exactly the same as the change project we did a while ago, where you have something, maybe it costs $3.92 and you pay a 10, and we have to figure out how many bills, how many quarters, how many dimes, all the way down. This is not just kind of the same thing, but exactly the same thing. So if we take that knowledge plus little tricks that we've learned since then to do it better, then we'll be able to pull this off. And the only details will be things like we got to say and before the last one, we got to put commas between the other ones. All those little things might be tricky, but the basic math is exactly the same as what we've done before. So let's kick it off with our dictionary. This is what we used back then to say how much is a quarter, how much is a dime, and we're going to do the same thing here. So I'm going to make a dictionary. Maybe I'll call it units. Maybe that's not the best name. We can always change it later. But it's going to say the name of the unit and then how much it's worth, just like we said nickel is 5 or whatever. So I'm going to say second is 1. Maybe we should make them plurals. I don't know. We'll think about it. And then I want it to go greatest to least, so I'm going to go up. And then minute is 60. And then hour. Now for these, I could calculate it myself, or I could just let the computer calculate it. And I'll say 60 times 60. Okay? And then the next one is, what is it, day? And that's going to be 60 times 60 times 24. And then finally the last one is year, and we just add a times 365. Now this is perfectly adjustable if we were to add weeks or whatever in the future. That's fine. The structure is all we need. Let's get this looking pretty. I like it to be indented at the end. And then if you remember how we did this with the change, we made a loop, and the loop would go through every unit, see how much we can make, if any, and then move on to the next one. This is pretty much what we're going to do now, but we might have new knowledge that's going to make it slightly nicer. Let's see what happens. When you go through a dictionary, you've got two things. You've got the name and we call it the key and the value, the name and the number, whatever. So let's call it unit and value, maybe. We can always change that. In units dot items. Dot items is the method to call when you want both sides of a dictionary. It's not the best name in the world, but that's what they went with. Now let's say what we're going to do. If you remember, we had two kinds of division related operations. We would divide and see how many whole coins we could get. Like if you have 73 and we're figuring out how many quarters, well, you can get 2 quarters. And then we needed to find the remainder, and that was called division and modulo. Well, since then we've learned that there's a function called divmod that just does both of them together. So I'm going to use that, but we could do it in 2 separate steps like we did back then. So we're going to say something equals divmod of what? Seconds and the value. And then what equals that? Well, there's going to be 2 results, right? The div and the mod. So we're going to have, we need a new name. We need like how many of the thing, how many days, how many hours, whatever. Maybe I'll call that count. And then the remainder is seconds, because it feeds back into the seconds. If I've got 1,000 seconds and I take off a chunk, then whatever's left is going to go into the next round of taking off another chunk. So that is pretty good, but we don't know unless we test it. So let's print that. Let's print the count in the unit, so it'll say how many days, how many hours, whatever. Yeah, that looks like we're on the right track. Like, it's finding that most of them are 0 most of the time, and then it ended up with 1 second. Okay, let's do one that has multiple. That's a minute and 2, a minute and 2, 1, 1, and 2. Great. So we're not outputting it yet. We're not formatting it yet. We're not doing anything to complete the function, but we're getting the right numbers, and that's the right first step. So now what are we going to do? Well, we could put them all in some kind of list or dictionary or whatever, and then do the formatting at the last second, where you put commas or you put ands and whatever. Or we could do that now and put together a little plural nice version and then put those together at the end. I'm actually curious about the plural thing, because when I was making the dictionary, I thought, should I put an S? No, maybe, because sometimes there's no S, right? Sometimes it's 1 minute, but most of the time there is, so we have to figure out where does that come in. We could just do it right here. Since we have a thing called count, we could say if count is 1, we add it, otherwise we add with an S, you know? Let's try that, and then we can always change it around later. Usually I like keeping things as numbers until the last second, like I don't do any formatting until the last second. But somehow on this one I'm getting the feeling that I want to spread it out. I want to do some format here, some later. So I'm going to say if count is 1, then we need a place to put this thing, but what's the thing going to be? It's going to be count, well, or just 1, unit, and that is, let's put them in some kind of list, and we'll call it result. Very vague name, but it works for now. We'll go result dot append this thing, and then if count is greater than 1, we're gonna do the same thing with an S. Okay, I can't just say if and then else, because that would also get the zeros, right? We have 1, we have more, but we also have 0. In fact, that's probably the most common, is a lot of them will be zeros, and I don't want to add that to my output at all. If we have 0 years, we don't need to say 0 years. Just like when you're making change and you have 0 dimes, you don't need to say how many dimes. You just go, it's a quarter and a penny. Okay, so I think this is pretty good. Let's print that result and see how we're doing. This is, yep, looking good. The ones with 2 have an S, the other ones don't. We haven't tested every possibility, but that seems just fine. And now we've got to do a little more formatting with commas on most of them, and then and on the last one. Or none of that if we just have 1, right? If it's just 2 minutes, we don't have any commas or any and or anything else. Now, there's a debate about the Oxford comma. Do you put a comma on the last thing in a list? Like if you're saying A and B and C, do you put a comma after B? Well, they're not doing it. Okay, maybe they're British. I think it's generally a British thing to leave it off. I'm gonna follow their lead and leave it off. Okay, so the question is, we have like all of them except the last one. How do we figure out the last one versus the other ones? And there are a couple ways to do that. You could use index -1. Index -1 is coming from the right. You get the first thing. But I hate indexing. As you've seen me do recently, I always try to avoid putting an index or even a slice if I can avoid it. So in this case, I'm going to use another strategy, which is called unpacking. We're going to unpack it into everything and then the last one. You know, sometimes we could say like first and last, or first and rest, or I think I'm going to call it body and tail. I think we're going to say the body is everything and the tail is just the last one. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say body and tail equals result, and then the way to say that the body is everything except the last one is you put a star. So star means however many this is, and then the tail is always exactly 1. And if there's only one thing, then body's nothing, tail is something. So this is like peeling off 1 from the rest. It's not the only way to do it, but it's just the thing that I'm feeling like at the moment. And if it doesn't work, we'll switch it. So now we're going to say, okay, if there's a body, then we're going to have commas and an and. If it's just a tail, it's just a tail, right? We also have to worry about what if it's neither, what if it's nothing at all, what if they give us 0 seconds. In that case, we got to handle it separately, because that would cause a problem right here. In fact, before I forget, let's look at that, because I definitely will forget once I start doing the other stuff. Oh, if it is 0, just return now, okay? And we can do that before we even do anything. So let's just say if not seconds, return now. Not seconds is, it's not a number. You know, it's 0, right? Not and 0 are kind of the same thing. I don't know why I do that. I could say if seconds equals 0, but I think it's cute to say not seconds. So how can we do the rest? So body tail, we can say if not body, we return tail. Is that right? Let's try that. Yes, that is right. Okay, so if there's only a tail, if there's not a body, we just give them the one, meaning like there's only one thing. If it's like 3 minutes and nothing else, then there's no body, it's just a tail, meaning the last one. Okay, then we'll do the final thing, which is the commas and. So we're going to return something with that format. And what I'm going to do is, for the commas, it might be a lot, right? We might have like 5 different things, and we got something, comma, something, comma, something. And the way to achieve that is the join method. I'm going to go single quote, even though I usually do double, because looking into the future, I know I'm going to use double wrapped around this. So single dot join body, and then and tail. So this is like body with the commas, tail with an and, which means we're going to put this whole thing in an F string. That is F for format. You say what you're inserting into a string with curly brackets. So this is comma join body, however many there are, space and space tail. This is nicer than adding like this plus this plus this plus this, which in this case would be kind of a lot. So I think I typed that right. Let's test it. Great. I love to say nice short lines, one thing at a time. However, I also like to say one return. I like to have return, and even if it's a slightly longer expression, I like to say return just once. So in this case, I'm going to do that, which is to say return this thing if there is a body, otherwise just return tail. Okay? I love to say return once. I know it's twice because we have the one at the top, but that's like the really special one. The one where there's just a single unit is not really special enough to be a separate return. That's just my opinion. It doesn't matter. It's just what I like. And so this says do that if there's a body, else just the tail. And beautiful. We got it. I'm not thrilled with every single bit of this, but I'm pretty happy. Let's check out the solutions from other people. This one is a dictionary. Well, it's actually not a dictionary. It's a list, but it's fulfilling the same role. And he's doing the div, just like we do the div mod. He's got the mod separately and joining it with an index. Like I said, I was trying to avoid where you go up to -1 and then -1. And he's even got the if-else thing, just like I did. This is the same thing as my if body else tail. He's just doing it in an uglier way because he hadn't set up the body tail thing. But it's exactly the same logic, which I love to see because then I see somebody else had the same thoughts I did. Out there in the world, who knows where that guy is, but all of these different people had similar solutions. But it's nice to see. I love it. This one, oh my gosh, look at this one. It's very, very specific. It's like, do this, do this, do this for each little thing. And he's losing the value of a loop. This guy's going through a loop. We're going through a loop, which means we don't have to say how to do hours, how to do minutes, how to do everything one at a time. We just say how to do this kind of thing in general. And then there's less typing for us. There's also less adjustment. If we need to add weeks or we need to add decades, you can throw it in the dictionary and everything else is fine. It doesn't have to change at all. Let's see another one. This one looking good. Same kind of thing with the string dot format, which is an old-fashioned way of doing what I did with an F string. But man, this is really the same thing that I was doing, just in my opinion uglier, but it is really exactly the same output. Like there's a join and there's an if to see if there's more than one thing, and it's just how you write it. You know, this person had the same thoughts I did. The abstract stuff is the same. The specific stuff is not, because he's using different ways to get there, but the abstract thoughts in his head, or their head, because it's many people, are really the same. And here's somebody who did, you know, it's not a loop, it's just literally mentioning everyone, but it's nice and clean and short and powerful. There's no, you know, big chain of indenting or anything. Oh, that one goes even more than I thought. This is just 4 lines and then putting them in there. I can definitely think of ways to do it differently, but I respect this. It's just saying what to do in order. Classic. Love it. I love this one. I think it looks good. Everything's spaced out. It's easy to read. The loop is pretty similar to our loop, even though it's a different type and he uses different names. Really good. I love it. This one, same kind of stuff. Like my thought of appending strings, where you do a little bit of formatting now and a little bit at the end. It seems like other people have that idea in mind as well. And well, you see a lot of variety, even though, you know, people have the div mod, they have some kind of loop, they have some kind of dictionary or list. There's a lot of variety in how they do it, and you can tell what people have preferences about. Like me, I love to have good names, and I love to avoid all the brackets and colons and stuff, so I try to do that. Other people try to follow whatever they learned when they learned some other language 10 years ago, and it's just nice to see. So this is a great problem because all the variety, and also because we can connect it to the money change we did way back in Q2, and now doing what is basically the same problem, you can have a lot more improvement because you've got a lot more skill since then and a lot more practice. There you go.